Hello, family. Enjoy this relaxing moment with Surly Tales. Remember to hit the like button, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. It means the world to us. Also, share this video with your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. In the heart of Lagos, where wealth spoke louder than words and luxury was a language of its own, the Okafors stood tall. Charles and Amara Okafor were the epitome of power and influence, a couple whose union was envied by many. From lavish events at the prestigious Eco Hotel to exclusive yacht parties off the shores of Victoria Island, they were the standard, the dream that many aspired to but few could attain. Charles Okafor was a self-made billionaire, a shrewd businessman who had built his empire from the ground up. His real estate ventures stretched from the high-end estates of Banana Island to the oil-rich lands of Port Harcourt. He had power, money, and the kind of confidence that came with knowing the world bowed at his feet. His wife, Amara, was no less formidable. Once a top model gracing the covers of Africa's biggest fashion magazines, she had seamlessly transitioned into philanthropy. She built schools, funded hospitals, and spearheaded campaigns that changed lives. Her beauty was timeless, elegant, and effortlessly captivating. But beyond the flawless exterior lay a mind sharper than most realized. They had it all, or so it seemed. Cracks beneath the surface. Amara had always been a woman of intuition, a woman who listened to the silent whispers of her heart. And lately, those whispers had turned into loud alarms. She had been married to Charles for nearly a decade, and in all those years, she had given him no reason to doubt her love or loyalty. But deep down, an unsettling question lingered, one she could no longer ignore. Would Charles remain faithful if temptation knocked at his door? She had seen too many marriages crumble under the weight of infidelity. She had comforted friends who cried into their designer pillows after discovering their husbands' affairs. She had witnessed powerful men even wealthier than Charles, fall for younger, prettier women who promised them excitement. She refused to be another statistic. It wasn't that Charles had given her any concrete reason to doubt him. But she understood power. And she understood men. They were only as faithful as their options. And Charles had options. Too many. So, she devised a plan. A test that would answer the question once and for all. If he passed, she would never question his loyalty again. If he failed, he would lose everything. A woman's ultimate test. The plan had to be flawless. She needed someone who could tempt Charles beyond reason, someone who embodied the kind of seduction that no man could resist. There was only one person who fit that role, Teni Becare. Teni was Amara's childhood friend, a woman as cunning as she was beautiful. Unlike Amara, who had chosen the path of philanthropy, Teni had immersed herself in the world of entertainment. She was an actress, one of Nollywood's best. She could transform into anyone, playing any role with disturbing perfection. She was also the kind of woman men lost their minds over. Her beauty was a weapon, luminous caramel skin, high cheekbones, full lips that seemed to curve in permanent mischief. She was effortlessly stylish, exuding an intoxicating mix of confidence and danger. But more than anything, she was loyal to Amara. When Amara first presented the plan over a glass of Dom Perignon at a secluded lounge in Ikoyi, Teni's first reaction was laughter. "Amara, you're playing with fire," she said, swirling the champagne in her glass. Amara leaned forward. "No, I'm exposing the fire before it burns me." Teni studied her friend carefully. "And if he fails?" A shadow passed over Amara's face. "Then he was never truly mine to begin with." There was silence for a moment before Teni sighed. "All right, let's test your billionaire." Setting the trap. The first phase of the plan was subtle. Teni would not throw herself at Charles. That would be too obvious. Instead, she would let him discover her. Let him chase her. Let him believe he was the one winning her over. She began appearing in the same high society circles as Charles. At first, it was coincidental, accidental meetings at business conferences, charity galas, and exclusive lounges where Lagos elite gathered. She positioned herself as an up-and-coming businesswoman, seeking mentorship from influential men like Charles. And Charles? He noticed her immediately. She played the role perfectly, confident yet slightly vulnerable, ambitious but in need of guidance. She asked the right questions, laughed at his jokes, and let her eyes linger just long enough to spark curiosity. It didn't take long before Charles started seeking her out. Amara watched from the shadows, her heart tightening with every step he took toward temptation. Would he pass? Or had she just handed her husband to another woman on a silver platter? The shift in Charles. The transformation was slow but unmistakable. Charles started staying out later, claiming he had business meetings that stretched into the night. He became more distant, more distracted. The warmth that once defined their marriage started fading, replaced by an unsettling coldness. And then came the real sign. He started guarding his phone. Charles had never been the type to hide things. His phone often lay carelessly on their bedroom nightstand. But now it was always face down. Always in his pocket. One evening, while they were having dinner at their mansion in Banana Island, Charles got a text. He glanced at his phone, and for the briefest second, Amara saw the flicker of a smile before he quickly placed it back down. "Who was that?" she asked casually, taking a sip of her red wine. "Business," he replied too quickly, barely looking up from his plate. Amara smiled to herself. He had no idea what was coming. The point of no return. Charles was no longer just intrigued, he was hooked. Teni had mastered the art of slow seduction, giving him just enough attention to keep him on edge. She played the game well, sending just enough messages to keep him curious but never enough to make herself seem too available. She understood that powerful men like Charles loved the chase. And she let him chase. The first real crack came when Charles started making excuses to spend time with her. One evening, he told Amara he had a last-minute business meeting. She didn't argue. She simply nodded and watched as he left their home, knowing full well that he was going to meet Teni. She could have stopped him. She could have confronted him. But she didn't. Not yet. Because this was only the beginning. If Charles thought he was making choices, he was wrong. He was playing a game. A game carefully designed by the very woman he was betraying. And soon he would realize that he wasn't the hunter. He was the prey. The lure of temptation. The transformation of a faithful man. The shift in Charles was slow but undeniable. At first, it was the small things, missed phone calls, delayed responses to Amara's messages, and late nights at the office that stretched longer than usual. He was no longer the man who would return home eager to tell her about his day. Now, he was a ghost in their marriage, present in body but absent in spirit. Amara noticed it all. She watched as he became more secretive, guarding his phone as though it contained the secrets of the world. The once open man she had married was now locked behind layers of deception. And it was all because of her. Teni. The woman she had chosen to test him. The woman who had become the wedge between them. The art of the chase. Teni played her role flawlessly. She never outright flirted with Charles. No, that would be too easy. Too obvious. Instead, she let him be the hunter. She made herself seem unavailable yet intriguing, independent yet slightly in need of guidance. And Charles? He took the bait. Their meetings started out as casual, brief conversations at business gatherings, accidental encounters at upscale restaurants. But soon, Charles began seeking her out deliberately. He offered to mentor her, to introduce her to the right people. She always played coy, always acted reluctant. "Charles, you have a wife," she would say with a half-smile, her tone playful but firm. He would shake his head, laughing. "It's not like that, Teni. I just enjoy our conversations." But they both knew the truth. It was exactly like that. And the deeper he fell, the less he realized how far he was sinking. A wife's silent observations. Amara didn't need to play detective. She had access to everything, his credit card statements, his driver's logs, and the movement of his personal security team. She knew the moment he started spending more time at places where Teni was present. She also knew when he started sending her expensive gifts, jewelry from Paris, designer bags from Milan, and even a rare limited edition Rolex. Still, she said nothing. Instead, she waited. Waited for him to make a mistake so grand that there would be no coming back from it. And then one evening, that moment arrived. The text that changed everything. It was a quiet Wednesday night when Charles returned home later than usual. He was distracted, his mind elsewhere. He barely acknowledged Amara's presence, muttering something about a long meeting before heading straight to the bathroom. His phone, for the first time in weeks, was left unattended on the bed. Unlocked. Amara didn't hesitate. She picked it up, her heart pounding as she scrolled through his messages. And there it was. A conversation with Teni. Charles, I can't stop thinking about you, Teni. Teni, Charles, this is dangerous. Charles, I don't care anymore. I want you. Not her. Teni, then what are you going to do about it? Amara's hands trembled. He had failed. Her husband had failed the test. The beginning of the end. That night, Amara didn't confront him. Instead, she smiled. Because now, the game had changed. Now, she wasn't just testing his loyalty. She was preparing to make him pay for his betrayal. And Charles? He had no idea that he had just placed himself in checkmate. The fall from grace. The slippery slope of deception. Charles was no longer a man being tempted, he was a man completely consumed. His affair with Teni was no longer a harmless flirtation. It had evolved into something far more dangerous, far more destructive. He was reckless now, no longer hiding his interest in her. He found himself needing her, craving her presence in a way he hadn't felt for anyone in years. And Amara? She was no longer his priority. She had become the woman he returned to out of obligation, not desire. At first, he tried to maintain balance. He still played the role of a loving husband in public, but behind closed doors, his mind was elsewhere. When Amara spoke, he barely listened. When she touched him, he flinched. He didn't realize he was pulling away. He only knew that he wanted something more, something different. And Teni offered just that. Or so he thought. The affair becomes real. One evening, Charles made a choice that sealed his fate. He had spent weeks circling around Teni, testing the waters of their connection, convincing himself that this was nothing more than a friendship laced with curiosity. But that night, he crossed the line. He had invited Teni to a private dinner at one of Lagos' most exclusive rooftop restaurants. The view was breathtaking, overlooking the glistening city lights, the soft hum of jazz filling the air. The atmosphere was intimate, dangerously so. Teni was dressed in a sleek black gown that clung to her body in all the right places. She smelled of expensive perfume, a scent that lingered long after she walked past. Charles couldn't stop himself. Halfway through dinner, he reached across the table, taking her hand in his. I don't think I can pretend anymore, he admitted, his voice low. Teni looked at him, her expression unreadable. Pretend about what? That I don't want this, he whispered. That he had said it. Teni sighed, pulling her hand away. Charles, you have a wife. A wife I don't love anymore, he confessed, the words spilling out before he could stop them. A dangerous silence followed. Then Teni smiled. If that's true, what are you going to do about it? The betrayal in motion. From that night on, Charles was all in. He no longer made excuses. He no longer felt guilt. He told himself that what he and Amara had was already broken, that this was inevitable. He began spending nights away from home, using business trips as an excuse. He booked luxurious hotel suites for Teni, spoiling her with expensive gifts, lavishing her with the kind of attention he once reserved for Amara. And with every passing day, Amara watched as the man she had built a life with slipped further and further away. She no longer had to wonder if he would fail the test. He already had. A wife's vengeance begins. Amara had been patient. She had been quiet. But now it was time to act. She gathered every piece of evidence she needed, screenshots of his messages, receipts of his extravagant spending, photos taken by the private investigator she had hired. She met with her lawyers, ensuring that when the time came, she would not only leave Charles, she would destroy him. And then she waited. Waited for him to dig his own grave. And he did. The ultimate betrayal. One evening, Charles made the biggest mistake of all. He came home and sat across from Amara, avoiding her gaze. I think we need to separate for a while, he said, his voice controlled but firm. Amara's heart pounded, but she kept her face neutral. Why? I need space. Things aren't working between us anymore, he said, his words rehearsed. I don't want to hurt you, But I can't pretend that everything is fine. There was the moment she had been waiting for. Her husband, the man she had loved, the man she had built an empire with, was leaving her. For another woman. But what Charles didn't know was that he wasn't the one leaving. She was. And when she did, she was taking everything with her. The unraveling. The fall of a king. Charles Okafor had spent his entire life believing that he was untouchable. Wealth had shielded him from consequences, power had kept him above the petty struggles of ordinary men, and his status had made him immune to suffering. But now, his world was about to come crashing down. He had made his choice. He had left Amara, convinced that Teni was the woman who could give him the excitement he had been craving. But what he failed to realize was that his greatest battle was not in leaving his wife. It was in surviving without her. Teni's true colors. The first cracks in his fantasy appeared almost immediately after he moved out of the mansion. At first, everything seemed perfect. He and Teni lived the life of luxury, traveling between Lagos, Dubai, and Paris, indulging in the finest things money could buy. But the honeymoon phase didn't last long. Teni was different now. No longer the charming, mysterious woman he had pursued, she had become demanding, entitled, and insatiable. She wanted more money, more gifts, more attention. And when Charles hesitated, she reminded him that she had sacrificed everything for him. "You left your wife for me, Charles," she would say, her voice laced with venom. "Don't start acting like you regret it." Regret. It was a word Charles hadn't dared to admit to himself. But deep down he knew. He had made a mistake. The slow collapse. Things began to spiral out of control faster than he could contain them. First, his businesses began to suffer. Deals that had once been guaranteed now fell through without explanation. Long-term investors started pulling out, citing instability as their reason. Even his once loyal board members were beginning to question his decisions. He didn't understand. How had everything changed so quickly? Then the real blow came. He arrived at his office one morning, only to be met with whispers and stolen glances. His personal assistant looked at him with pity, while his CFO refused to meet his eyes. Something was wrong. And then he saw it. The newspaper headline. Charles Okafor's secret affair exposed, business empire at risk? Beneath the headline were photos, crystal clear images of him and Teni in Dubai, in Paris, at private resorts. The article detailed every expense, every extravagant gift he had given her. His infidelity was no longer a secret. It was public knowledge. And suddenly, Charles Okafor was no longer just a billionaire. He was a scandal. Amara's power move. What Charles didn't know was that this was all part of Amara's plan. While he had been busy chasing Teni, she had been working behind the scenes, moving with the precision of a woman who had nothing left to lose. She had released the evidence to the press, ensuring that the world knew the truth about the man who had betrayed her. But that wasn't all. She had also taken control of their business empire. Through a series of legal maneuvers, she had removed his name from the most valuable assets, transferring ownership to herself and trusted allies. By the time Charles realized what had happened, it was too late. He was no longer the king of his empire. Amara was. The confrontation. Desperate and angry, Charles stormed into their former mansion, her mansion now. He found Amara sitting in the grand living room, sipping a glass of red wine, her expression calm. "You destroyed me," he said, his voice shaking. She looked at him, unfazed. "No, Charles. You destroyed yourself. I only made sure the world saw it." He clenched his fists. "I was your husband. You were supposed to be my partner, my protector," she replied coldly. "Instead, you were my biggest betrayal." For the first time, Charles saw it, the finality in her eyes. He had lost her. Completely. And now he had nothing. The ruins of a man. Teni left him soon after. She had never loved him. She had only loved what he could give her. And now that he was a broken man, drowning in scandal and financial ruin, she had no reason to stay. She disappeared without a word. And Charles? He was left alone, a fallen king with nothing but the memories of what he had lost. Amara had one. But the truth was, she had never needed to fight. Because loyalty was never something that should be tested. It was something that should have never been in question. The Queen's revenge. The aftermath of betrayal. The once mighty Charles Okafor was now a man in ruins. The fall had been swift and merciless. Where he was once celebrated, he was now mocked. Where he was once feared, he was now pitied. His empire had crumbled beneath him, and the woman he had abandoned was the one who now controlled everything he had built. The worst part? Amara had not lifted a finger in anger. She had not screamed, she had not wept, she had not even cursed him. She had simply let him fall. And that was the deepest wound of all. The final meeting. Charles had spent days trying to reach Amara, calling, messaging, even showing up at her office. She ignored him every time. But on a quiet Sunday evening, he found himself standing at the gates of their former mansion. The guards hesitated but eventually let him through, whether out of pity or instruction from Amara, he didn't know. She was waiting for him on the terrace, a picture of elegance and power. She wore a flowing silk dress, her skin glowing under the soft golden hues of the setting sun. In front of her was a glass of wine, untouched. She didn't look surprised to see him. Charles, she greeted as if he were a business associate, not the man she had once loved. He swallowed, suddenly aware of how different they had become. He was a shadow of his former self, while she looked radiant. Amara, He paused, unsure of where to begin. She tilted her head. You what? Regret it? His throat tightened. Yes. She smirked. Regret what exactly? Everything. A quiet chuckle escaped her lips. That's the problem, Charles. You regret losing everything. But you don't regret betraying me. Silence stretched between them. He wanted to deny it. He wanted to tell her that he regretted hurting her, that if he could take it all back, he would. But the truth was he had only started to regret it when he lost, when he had nothing left. She saw it in his eyes. You're not sorry for what you did, she continued. You're sorry for what it cost you. Charles clenched his fists. Amara, please. You know me. You know I never meant. But you did, she interrupted, her voice eerily calm. You did mean it, Charles. You pursued her. You lied to me. You spent our money on her. You left me. You did all of it willingly. And now you expect what? Forgiveness? He exhaled shakily. I don't expect anything. He hesitated. I need to know if there's any way we can fix this. She stared at him for a long moment, then let out a soft laugh, one of amusement, not happiness. Fix this, she repeated. Charles, you didn't just break a plate. You burned down the entire kitchen. His shoulders sagged. It's over, she said simply. And for the first time, the weight of those words truly settled in. It was over. There was no coming back. No second chances. No redemption. The end of Charles Okafor. That night, Charles walked away from the mansion he had once called home, knowing that he would never step inside it again. He had lost everything. His wealth, his power, his reputation. But losing Amara? That was the wound that would never heal. He had been given the gift of a faithful, powerful woman. And he had thrown it away. Now, he was nothing but a cautionary tale, a reminder that betrayal had consequences, and that no man, no matter how rich or powerful, was untouchable. The rise of Amara Okafor. Amara, on the other hand, flourished. She took control of the business empire, expanding it beyond what even Charles had imagined. She traveled, invested, and became a name bigger than just the billionaire's wife. She was now the billionaire herself. And as she sat in her penthouse suite in Paris one evening, sipping champagne and looking at the city lights, she felt nothing but peace. Because the truth was, she had never needed Charles to be powerful. She had always been powerful on her own. He was just too blind to see it. And now it was too late. The end. If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.